He stood in the middle of the room, surrounded by dark walls with nothing but a dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling right above him. Blankly staring at the light, he was trying to put together the events that had led up to his captivity. He was just a scientist who was trying to find a cure for the outbreak, but the government thought otherwise. They thought that it was he and his team who had spread the disease even further. The government was looking for someone to blame to ease the minds and voices of the population. And who better than the only remaining scientist left who had anything to do with their project? Samson. The scientist took his fixed gaze away from the light bulb and looked towards the reinforced door. It was too dark to see on the other side of the room, but he had heard the heavy clank of metal, indicating one of the guards had opened the slot on the door. "Are you ready to talk?" Samson kept quiet for a moment. They've kept him here in this dark room for 4 days, deprived of food and water. Being a scientist, he knew what deprivation of food and water does to the human body. He was dizzy and fatigued. Simple everyday tasks became hard to do. "What's the point?" he said calmly with a dry mouth. "I will tell you nothing new. Everything I've already told you is everything there is to." The door slot slammed with that same heavy clank of metal. He took a deep breath and walked towards the wall behind him, slowly, with his hand outreached trying to feel for the wall. He sat down in the darkness and stared back at the dim light. He then closed his eyes and thought about his wife, for it was the only thing keeping him sane and alive. Her beautiful face and the memories they shared. He must survive. He had sent his wife, Emily, to France before joining the team of scientists who were trying to find a cure. He sent her there in fear that his wife would join those who have been infected by the disease. That was 3 months ago. He missed her so. She was the only person he had left in his life. Everyone he knew was gone. His neighbors, his parents, the old couple who ran the flower shop. The flower shop, he thought. He remembered buying his wife flowers for their anniversary a few days before the outbreak. He and his wife were very good friends with the old, lovely couple that ran the flower shop. The old couple would tell Samson that he and his wife reminded them so much of themselves when they were younger, and that Samson was taking the right path to a happy life. Samson held back tears as he started reminiscing about that day he had gone in the flower shop for his anniversary. "Samson, your wife is a very lucky woman. Thank you for your kind words, Mrs. Ramos, but it's nothing much." "Really?" Samson exclaimed, blushing. "Oh, nonsense. You come here every week. You always have something for her to show your love. These aren't just words, Samson. This is the truth," said Mrs. Ramos with a delighted smile. "Look who we have here," a voice said excitedly. It was a powerful, but calming voice. "So what will you be getting this time round, Samson? Same thing as last week?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Ramos. Actually, I was thinking about getting her something a little different today. It's our anniversary and I wanted to get her something extra special." "Ah, I've got just the thing for you, Samson. Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back." Mr. Ramos made his way to the back of the store. Within a minute, Mr. Ramos came back out with the most brilliant bouquet Samson had ever seen. They were vivid, exotic, everything he could have imagined. Samson was speechless. "We just got these yesterday," he said with a smile. "Wow! This is just amazing. It's perfect. But I don't think I can afford to stop right there," Mr. Ramos interrupted him. "Now who said anything about you having to pay for this?" Samson's eyes widened with happiness. Mr. Ramos looked at his wife with a smile. She smiled back. He handed the bouquet to Samson. "Think of it as our present to you and Emily. Happy anniversary." Samson opened his eyes. He realized that he let out a few tears after all. What a lovely couple, he thought. He hoped that he and his wife would be just as happy as they were when the time came for them to be their age. He closed his eyes again and imagined the old couple being so happy. He had a light smile, but it soon faded. He had almost forgotten what happened. When the outbreak came, Samson checked on the old couple to see if they were okay, but was instead met with the diseased feeding on Mr. and Mrs. Ramos' corpses. The image of the lovely couple was soon replaced with the horrifying image of their half-eaten bodies and expressionless faces. Memories of that day started filling Samson's mind. He remembers everything. Mr. Ramos. Mrs. Ramos. Hello. Is anyone here? Samson was pacing quickly outside of the flower shop. The diseased had reached their city and Samson wanted to bring the old couple with him and his wife to someplace safe. The front door of the flower shop was locked, so Samson started looking for another entrance. After a little bit of searching, he came upon the back entrance of the shop. He grabbed the doorknob and was relieved when it opened. Samson entered the back room carefully and started calling out for the couple, but more calmly this time. Mrs. Ramos? Are you here? We need to get out of this city. Samson felt like he was just talking to himself. But he couldn't just assume no one was here. As he walked through the room carefully, his eyes fell upon a bouquet of flowers. It was the same set of flowers that the old couple had given to Samson and his wife as a gift. This motivated Samson even more to find them. As Samson was making his way towards the door that led to a small hallway, he called out again, Mr. Ramos? Mrs. Ramos? It's suddenly. His heart dropped. When Samson entered the hallway, he saw the diseased, 3 of them to be exact. They were crouching, feeding in the corner of the hallway. Samson went quiet and felt fear like no other, for it was the first time he'd ever seen 1, let alone 3. His heart started beating faster and faster. Samson turned around and as he was about to start walking back, he started to wonder just who the diseased were eating. He was desperately hoping it wasn't the old couple. Samson swallowed his spit and turned back around. Determined to find out, Samson carefully made his way towards the corner of the hallway. He was going carefully from one room to the next, making sure he hardly made any noise until he reached the last room. He peeked out very cautiously to not let these creatures know he was no more than 10 feet away from them. Samson strained his eyes to at least catch a glimpse of the corpse. Soon, his gaze was met with the expressionless face of Mr. Ramos. There was another body next to the corpse, but Samson didn't need to check to know who it was. Samson couldn't believe it. Samson pulled his head back into the room and put his back up against a wall. He sobbed for a few seconds until he heard the growls of the diseased. Samson quickly covered his mouth. The diseased stopped eating, scanned the hallway briefly, and then went back to their meal. The diseased snarled, blood dripping from their mouths. Samson was frozen, he dared not to make his presence known. So he stood, listening to these creatures eat. The gushing of blood, the breaking of bones, and the tearing of muscles. Soon, Samson finally got the courage to move his body and ran from the flower shop. He didn't want to look upon the corpses of the couple again. So he ran. He ran non-stop through the city until he got home. While doing so, he was hearing screams and cries for help. He so desperately wanted to help those who were crying for it, but he feared for his own life and his wife's. Why, he thought. Why is this happening? What have we done to deserve something like this? Why Mr. and Mrs. Ramos? They were such good people. Why? Samson woke up to a familiar banging sound coming from the door. He didn't realize he had fallen asleep, but was thankful for being woken up. He didn't want to think about them anymore. Still weak and weary, Samson stayed seated and waited for the guard to open the slot. To his surprise, it was not just the slot on the door that had opened this time, but the whole door. Samson squinted his eyes. The brightness from the outside of the room was something his eyes were not used to anymore. Still, he looked towards the door. He saw the silhouette of one of the guards standing right outside of the room. Soon, 2 more figures had joined the guard. One of them was another guard, but he could not figure out who the third figure was. The third silhouette looked very frail and seemed to have a bag over his or her head. Perhaps another prisoner, he asked himself. He then noticed a sort of chain coming from the guard's belt and into the figure's neck. The guards pushed the figure inside the room hard enough to have let the figure hit the ground. The guards came inside the room and removed the bag from the figure's head. Samson's muscles tightened all around his body. This figure, or more so, thing on the floor snapped its teeth in the air. It started twisting and writhing, moaning and groaning. The guards have brought in one of the diseased. The guards then released the creature from its chain and ran out quickly. Right before the door slammed shut, Samson heard faint laughter from the guards. Those bastards, he thought. Who in the right mind would do something like this? Samson stood up weakly. He mustered everything he had in him to stand up. He was stuck in a darkened room with a single light bulb that didn't even illuminate the whole room with one of those creatures. His eyes, moving quickly, were scanning the room left to right non-stop. Though he was exhausted, Samson controlled his breathing. It was tiring to stand and he didn't dare to sit back down. So he stood just waiting and listened to the creature sniffing around while moaning and groaning. Its stench soon filled the room, like a mixture of vinegar and human waste. The stench made him gag, and it hurt him. The creature snapped its teeth again and gave a quick snarl towards his direction and got louder, hungrier. It knew that there was food in the room. Samson had given away his position. The groans were getting closer and closer, until it gave a fierce growl not more than 5 feet away from him. Samson ran frantically, dodging blindly from one corner of the room to the next. He could not see it, only hear it, but the creature could smell him. It knew exactly where to go. Finally, Samson decided to run towards the middle of the room where the only source of light shined. He ran and stopped at the edge where the light reached its end. He turned around and finally saw the creature for the first time walking quickly towards him. It was a woman. Light grey skin, an open stomach, a nasty gash from her right eye going down to her lower lip and her whole left cheek missing. Her nose was missing along with part of her right ear. Her face was contorted of pure hunger and violent rage. Her eyes, which were once a different color, are nothing more but shades of yellow. Anyone who would have known this woman before would not be able to recognize her now. "Come here, you ugly bastard," Samson thought. She snarled louder as she was finally able to see her dinner. She jerked forward and reached violently for Samson. With all the energy Samson had left, he grabbed both of her forearms before she was able to get a hold of him. He almost wanted to let go. He had never actually held one before, and the feeling of this woman's body was not what he had expected. Her skin felt very, very soft and cold. It felt as if her skin could be ripped off any moment. It was as soft as a baby's blanket and as cold as ice, but she was incredibly strong. The diseased had no threshold for pain. He struggled with the creature. He was trying to kick her down so he could give her head one big stomp, but she was continuously snarling at him and trying to bite him, snapping her teeth towards Samson. The stench of her breath was worse than the previous. The saliva dripping from her mouth was thick and brown. Samson could hear the dense plop noise it would make when it hits the ground. He could barely handle the creature and he was losing hope. He couldn't stop her, and unlike the diseased, humans get tired. He closed his eyes for what he thought would be the final time he would, but an image of his wife appeared in his mind. Memories flooded him. With renewed resolution, Samson tightened his grip on her forearms, lifted his right leg, and gave one final kick to her chest. The skin on the creature's forearms and hands ripped and slid off into his own, but he couldn't be disgusted by this now. She snarled and wailed loudly as she looked at him with angry eyes from the ground. With a loud yell and all his might, he drove his foot right into the middle of the creature's forehead. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 stomps and it finally stopped moving. He stood there, once again, under that same light, but staring down this time with anger in his eyes and staggered breathing. Samson stood above the creature for a while, making sure the deed was done. His arms were tense and shaking, full of fear and rage, ready to attack again if needed. After a few moments, he had calmed down. "It's over." He wiped his shoe on the floor and his hands on his clothes to rid of himself the skin of the creature. As he wiped his hands, he heard a small, metallic sound. A sound that a coin would make if dropped on the ground. It was a ring. It was stuck with the soft skin that was pulled off of the creature's hands. Curious, he picked it up and sat a few feet away from the creature. He cleaned off the ring and examined it. Inside of the ring, something was engraved. His eyes widened with disbelief. Together forever, Samson and Emily. The end.